Hello and welcome to episode 145 of My Circus, My Monkeys. Last time, I talked about why so many topics that I cover don't necessarily seem directly related to supervising. So things like emotions, stress, beliefs, etc. So this week, I thought we'd get a little more practical and dig into the root causes of some common supervisor issues. Often people identify symptoms as being the actual problem, which means you spend a lot of time putting on band-aids on situations instead of addressing what's really causing those symptoms. So today, I'm going to break down some of the possible reasons you might be having some common issues as you supervise your team. So stay tuned. So for the past week or so, I've had some mystery health issues with my dog that manifested symptomatically as her not eating. And I don't want to go too deep into the details of the situation, but in a nutshell, her vet and I noticed and treated a few things like allergies that we thought were behind it, only for me to realize a week and a half into everything that the main reason she wasn't eating was her stomach was upset. Yes, the things that we were treating were issues that may have contributed or started the appetite issues, but addressing those things by themselves didn't actually fix the underlying problem. And when I realized this, I felt terrible. So in my mind, AKA the story I told myself, is I'd let her suffer for a week and a half without addressing her acid reflux. And I blamed myself for not acting on this sooner. And when I shared my concern with my coach, Dawn, she told me, you can't do things sooner when you don't know what those things are. So I'm going to repeat that because I think it's really important. You can't do things sooner when you don't know what those things are. Now, hearing that helped me put things into perspective. In reality, I had acted pretty quickly. I'd taken my dog to the doctor within days of her appetite decreasing, had several follow-up appointments during that time to make sure the treatments that we were doing were going well. And each time an issue was resolved and she still wasn't eating, I went back. But she had never had this issue before, so I just didn't know the signs of acid reflux or tummy troubles. And until I figured that out, I truly couldn't have done anything. So I want to use that quote again, you can't do things sooner when you don't know what those things are, as our guide today. My dog's lack of appetite was a symptom. And until I understood what was causing the issue, I wasn't going to be able to meaningfully address it. And the same thing happens to us as supervisors. We see a behavior or an issue that we think is problematic. We want it to stop. So we identify that thing as what needs to change. And when we use a ton of our energy and time focused on trying to get that thing to change, it doesn't necessarily fix the problem if it's not the root cause. So again, for me, my dog, just eat, just eat, just eat. We fix these other things. Why won't you eat? I needed to understand that her stomach was upset. So here are 3 common complaints that we often hear from supervisors. 1, in simplistic terms, you can never get caught up. There's just too much work. 2, you're constantly interrupted by staff or students or putting out fires. And 3, Susie isn't doing blank. So basically, you have a staff member who's not doing some portion of their job. So the problem with all of these is that when you just focus on getting caught up, individual interruptions or interruptors, you're going to continue to run yourself ragged with limited success. If you really want to see change, if you want to know what you need to do sooner, you have to address the root cause, which are almost always related to your systems. So systems include things like your habits, your patterns, your procedures, the things that you do on automatic pilot every day. So once you know what's going on with your systems and upgrade them, you're going to see huge changes instead of having to deal with situation after situation. So let's dig in Because again, once you know what these root causes are, you can start to put the correct things into motion to upgrade and fix the actual problem. Okay, so the first one, too much to do, not enough time. Almost everyone we talk to has this complaint, and the workload in higher ed has gotten absolutely ridiculous. We seem to have decided that doing more will somehow solve all our problems. And of course, this is exacerbated by budget constraints, which often means not being able to hire the appropriate amount of staff to reasonably do said work. And yet, despite how hard we and our staff members work, our problems haven't been solved, have they? If sacrificing our time, our energy, our well being was the answer, the field of higher education should be flourishing. Now, on some level, I think we all know this, right? But the additional problem is that the culture is still driven by this do more with less attitude. And this attitude is frequently driven by stress. And I've talked tons about how the stress response is a physiological one. And that means it impacts us mentally, emotionally, and physically, our entire system. And when we are in a stress response, our prefrontal cortex, our conscious brain, goes offline. And the only thing that's left is our subconscious brain, and it only cares about surviving the imminent threat. And that means we're only thinking about short-term solution and never long-term success. The more panicked we get about getting everything done, the more stressed we get, and the less efficient and effective we become. According to Gallup's research, achiever is the #1 most common talent theme. And this is reflective of a society that sees doing more and more as a virtue, and not being constantly in motion seems like laziness or lack of motivation. But again, if working harder and constantly actually made things better, wouldn't higher ed and our society be better? Because we're running ourselves into the ground for what? So I saw a post online the other day that said something along the lines of, your best is what you can do without causing harm to yourself physically, emotionally, or mentally. And I thought this was really profound because we often think of our best as what we can do until we collapse into a heap. But the minute you go beyond your best, again, using that lovely quote that I found, means that you're inviting stress to take over, which means no one's going to benefit. And again, why is that? Because stress doesn't care about your goals, doesn't care about your college, doesn't care about your students. It only cares that you survive this situation. And in this case, crossing things off your to-do list. Sure, sometimes other people may benefit, but that is an accidental byproduct. And again, typically a short-term gain, not a long-term one. To the degree that stress is part of the problem, self-care is part of the solution. And again, I've done many episodes on that. But what about the huge to-do list? The solution here is prioritization. Getting everything done on your to-do list is not only impossible, it's not even actually going to solve the things you think it will. Productivity is not about doing everything, it's about doing the right things. And that includes the right things for you and your team. You need to take the time to think about your actual long-term goals, personally and professionally, and start getting rid of things that are not directly related to those things. This is 100% going to stress achievers out because they already have things on their to-do list. But doing things are only as valuable as where they lead you. If your to-do list tasks are not aligned with your personal and professional objectives, doing them for the sake of doing is just going to sap your energy and time. And that's true for your staff as well. The more you prioritize in relation to your goals and resources, the better off you, your team, and your students will be. Okay, so that's the first big thing. Number two, you're constantly interrupted by staff, students, fires. This is another theme that frequently comes up with supervisors. You want to get things done, and maybe you're even prioritizing, so you're just focusing on the items that will give you the best ROI. But you cannot focus because of all the interruptions. And I've mentioned this previously, but it takes on average 21 minutes to refocus after an interruption. And if you're interrupted every 20 minutes, you're never focusing on anything, not really. Now, maybe you have just a few repeat offenders who are constantly interrupting you, or maybe pretty much everybody on your team feels comfortable to stop by whenever they feel like it. Or maybe it's your students. They stop by without an appointment and zap all your time. It can be really easy to look at Brenda, your team, or those students and blame them for the problem. I mean, if they would just do their job, make decisions for themselves, make an appointment, whatever, you wouldn't be constantly interrupted, right? Well, sure. But the real question is, why aren't they doing those things? We've talked about setting clear expectations in other episodes. And if you're not being clear on what you want folks to do and reinforcing those expectations, so accountability, you're going to be interrupted. So let's take your staff members, whether it's one offender or your whole team. What happens when they interrupt you? Let's say they have a quick question about a situation. Are they rewarded with an answer right away? And maybe you've even mentioned, hey, can we hold your questions until, fill in the blank, some mutually beneficial time? Do you still just keep telling them the answer if they continue interrupting you? If so, they have zero reason to stop doing it. They are getting their needs met, so they're going to continue to interrupt you. Let's say students drop in without an appointment. Are they being asked to make an appointment for another time? Or do you stop what you're doing and see them? Now, stress can return here as well, because we have been told that we must serve the students or they will leave and we'll have to lay people off and everyone will be out without a job and the college will shut down. But what does your system look like for serving your students? Is it everyone gets constantly interrupted because we're afraid if they have to wait at all, they're going to withdraw from the university? That is a recipe for burnout, and no one is achieving a goal other than immediate gratification. Again, short term. You have to think about what is the system that addresses the needs of everyone involved and is effective. And this is going to involve retraining people. For you and your team, are you meeting with them individually on a regular basis? Or are you holding some regular office hours where folks are welcome to come and ask whatever? But both of those options give your team members plenty of opportunities to ask questions. But in those spaces, you're not expecting or wanting to get other things done. Yes, of course, there are actual emergencies that come up, but have you defined what is an emergency? That way, staff members can easily identify whether blank is an emergency and warrants an interruption, or if it's something that can wait until your next meeting or office hour. But that also means that when someone comes with a question that is not an emergency, you must retrain yourself from just giving them the answer, even if it only takes you a minute. Because remember, the goal is to get them to stop interrupting you. So you cannot reward them with the answer. Instead, you have to remind them that blank isn't an emergency, so they're going to have to wait until your next meeting or office hour to discuss it. Now, during your office hours and individual meetings, your focus is on your team members. So again, you're not expecting to get projects done. That's for another time when you're not being interrupted now. But the rest of the time, you've set up a system that allows you to work on projects, to work on reports, whatever you need to do. Okay, but what about students? Won't they drop out if they aren't given immediate attention? Now, that's a stress response, isn't it? And this is not an either or situation. Even though your panicked subconscious brain, and perhaps the panicked subconscious brains of the powers that be, may think that students should be able to get answers in a timely fashion, but you can absolutely train them to do so within a system that respects the students, you, and your team members. Is there a website or app that's easy to navigate with the information that most people ask? If so, focus on directing the students there and how to use that information and how to find that information. And you may think, well, it takes just as much time to tell them the answer as it does to show them on the website. But you only have to show them on the website once or twice, and then they will know how to find the answers themselves. And that's a win-win, because do you think they want to walk over to your office or call you? They don't. They just want the information. Another possible solution is, if you have a number of team members, can you set up an information desk where people can come and get basic questions answered? And they can help students set up appointments for more in-depth issues. Yes, you and whatever team member is working at the information desk isn't going to get anything else done at that time. But if you're rotating that duty, it's only a few hours a day or week, or again, depending on how many staff members you have. And the rest of the time, you and they can focus on individual meetings, projects, and other things without the worry of being constantly interrupted, along with the stress of, well, I must address Frank right now because otherwise he'll be mad. Because there's other ways for Frank to get that information. Now, again, with any system adjustment, there's going to be retraining involved. You're going to have to challenge your own automatic pilot settings and even the stories that keep you stuck there. And your team or students are going to have to adjust. But if you're consistent, they will. Now, might some students or staff members not like the new way? Sure. But very few of them are going to quit or withdraw because of it. And quite frankly, the ones that would are exactly the type of folks who are probably taking up a lot of your time right now. So if they left, that's really going to give you a lot more time for other people and other students to support them. Okay, so that was number 2. Number 3, Susie isn't doing blank. Basically, Susie isn't doing some part of her job. So this one can really encompass a lot of things. Maybe Susie's coming in late. Maybe she's doing things, but not the way you want them done. Or maybe she's dropping the ball on some key aspects of her job. But in a nutshell, Susie isn't meeting your expectations. This, of course, is frustrating because A, blank isn't getting done. So either students aren't getting the things that they need, or someone else on your team, maybe even you, have to step in and do it. It's also frustrating because B, you have to take time out of your valuable schedule, use your energy to figure out what the bleep to do about Susie to fix this problem. Now, again, on the surface, this seems like a Susie problem. I mean, if Susie would just do blank or do blank to X degree, there would be no problem, right? Maybe. I want to start off by saying that yes, there are absolutely people who do not care about their jobs or aren't qualified for them. But most of the time, that's not actually what's going on. Most of the time, folks aren't getting the support they need to be successful. So once again, we have to step back and look at the systems that you and your institution have set up. In Gallup's Q12, which again is their engagement tool, the very first question is about, I know what's expected of me at work. And most supervisors are not good at setting clear expectations. I mean, remember that big to-do list from item number 1 today? So you hire someone, you're just so relieved that you give them the absolute bare minimum information and send them off to work so you can get back to your normal workload. Yay, Susie's here. I'm sure she'll figure things out in time. Maybe, maybe not. But why is that on Susie? Higher ed is a constantly changing landscape. I mean, how many times just this semester has your supervisor or someone up the administration suddenly told you to add or change something? They may be small things or giant things, but change is inherently stressful on our brains and it takes up a ton of energy. And if it's a new hire, yes, of course, they should have the background to understand and execute the role, but the specific hows and whats are going to vary by campus. So the less you help them acclimate to their new job, their new environment, the longer it's going to take them to get up to speed with your department and institution. And maybe some things they won't get up to speed with because, again, they don't know, they haven't been told. Not to mention, this is all terrible from an energy management standpoint. I guarantee that even your best employees are wasting valuable time and energy figuring things out that should have been made clear from the beginning. And even if they get it right, how many other things might they have accomplished if expectations had just been made clear, if they hadn't had to figure out anything? And I do want to stop and clarify. I am not talking about micromanaging or stifling innovation. Clear expectations should be focused on outcomes. Project A can be done in a variety of ways, but at the end, we need to see X, Y, and Z. That allows your team members to focus on their unique strengths, be creative where appropriate, but still accomplish the underlying goal, the outcomes that you need for that particular task, project, event, etc. So you need to ask yourself, what is your system for communicating whatever it is to Susie and all your employees? Are you being clear about the outcomes and goals associated with this task, project, event that they're responsible for? Are you checking in with them along the way to make sure everyone's still on the same page? After all, things are constantly changing. So from an energy management perspective, the quicker you can correct someone's course, the less energy they are wasting. Yes, giving them a quick overview and hoping it all comes out okay in the end is less work up front. Again, short-term win. But long-term, what are the costs? Are you getting frustrated when things aren't done right? And I'm putting quotes around right because we often take a I'll know it when I see it approach with expectations. In other words, you're not clear from the beginning, but after they've worked on it for hours and show up with a draft or a final project or product, you judge it based on your first impressions. Maybe you're frustrated they couldn't read your mind, or you're annoyed that now you have to step in and fix things. But either way, I guarantee you're not nearly as upset as Susie or the other folks who've busted their bleeps to try and guess what you or the administration wanted, only to find out that it's wrong. And again, I'm quoting wrong because how can it actually be wrong if you're not giving any direction at the beginning to allow you to get it right? So that is why it is so important to set up expectations and communicate any changes along the way. Otherwise, there is a huge chance you're not going to be on the same page when you get to the end. And the second part, of course, to setting expectations is holding people accountable. Did they succeed? If so, thank them or celebrate. If not, coaching conversation around that. So maybe Susie has been told they need to do blank. And let's say, for the sake of ease, she needs to come in at 8 o'clock in the morning. And you told her that when she started, and for a while she did. But then maybe traffic was bad one day and she was a few minutes late. What did you do? Did you reinforce that expectation? Maybe add, hey, I know sometimes unexpected things happen and it might keep you from being on time. But when that happens, I need you to call me or email me or text me or, again, whatever works, so I know what's going on. It's important that you're here by 8 a.m. because blank. The problem is there are all sorts of things in job descriptions and in conversations that are going to come up around a position, but not all of them turn out to be crucial to the role. Some folks, sure, technically they started at 8 a.m., but there's a lot of flexibility built into their position, department, or institution. But maybe Susie needs to be in at 8 a.m. because she has to open the office door for other workers. But if you haven't conveyed that, and she sees Brenda rolling in at 8:15 or 8:30 every day, she might assume that 8 a.m. isn't really set in stone. And the only solution to this is clarity. Again, I'll mention that classic Brene Brown quote, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So only by being clear and reinforcing it and holding people accountable when they don't meet expectations can you actually shore up the problem with Susie and any other performance management issues that come up with your team. Okay, so I've gone through a few of the common issues that supervisors find challenging. Too much work, interruption, performance management issues. There are plenty of others that I didn't dive into, but hopefully you noticed that all of the core issues are related to systems. And again, when I'm talking about systems, it's the habits, patterns, and procedures that you and your institution have created that either support or get in the way of you and your folks' success. Effective systems that are aligned with your goals allow you to do what you need to do on autopilot. When you prioritize, you see how individual to-do items fit into your success, and you can choose what's the most important things to spend your limited resources on. When you create a system that focuses on intentional connection instead of constant interruption, you get things done and people get the information they need in a timely manner. When you effectively communicate expectations and hold people accountable on the regular, employee issues can be quickly resolved and behaviors can improve. When you manage your stress, you avoid going into a stress response that keeps you from showing up at your best, and in fact, keeps you from making a bunch of short-term decisions that you later have to fix. So at the beginning of this episode, I mentioned that my coach told me you can't do things sooner when you don't know what those things are. So when you're confronted with any challenge, don't assume that the specific situation in front of you is the actual problem. Take the time to ask whether it's just a symptom of something else. Then look at the systems that regulate whatever that thing is. It's only by getting to the root cause that you can understand what things you need to do to make it easier for you, your team, and your students. Otherwise, you're just going to see the same issues popping up over and over again.